So today we're going to be having a marketing workshop, teaching you guys how to do that. Will be Professor Culleton, the newest member of our Raptor team. All right.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Super. Thank you very much. If you ever have to market something and you know people want to watch the video, let them watch the video first. You'll get much more attention later on. So, this is not a full 3-credit marketing course. I'll be glad to teach you a full 3-credit marketing class if you pay for it. But what I wanted to do today is give you just really some quick highlights, some things to pay attention to be aware of, and hopefully that will help you when you make your pitch at the final presentation. So we're going to be talking about 3 things. The marketing mix, just kind of an overview of what it is and how it works. How to position your product in the minds of your potential consumers. And then finally, how to estimate sales. Now I have to tell you, some of this stuff came directly from Professor Fraser. She did this same process last year, and I stole freely from her. So I just want to acknowledge that if you have questions, particularly on estimating sales, I may ask you to contact Professor Fraser. So the marketing mix starts with the customer. Who is the customer? What makes them unique? What are the distinguishing factors about the customer? We're going to be looking at that in a few minutes, but the other 4 elements, the 4 key elements of any marketing plan include first the product. What is it that makes your product unique? What makes it something that people are going to want to get their hands on? What makes it desirable? So that's part of what you have been working on already. You've already had these kinds of discussions about what is your product and why would people want to buy it. The second part is placement, and that is where are you going to put it so customers can find it? Is it going to be in vending machines? Is it going to be in 7-Elevens? Is it going to be in exclusive retail shops? So part of your decision is where do you see your product so that your customers can find it and actually go ahead and purchase it. The third piece is what most people think about when they think of marketing, and that's the promotion. That's the advertising, the catchy jingles, the getting Rolling Stones music behind your commercials, that kind of stuff. So we will talk a little bit about that, but that's something that hopefully you've already given some thought to. The last part is the price of the product. And so often people say, oh, I'm going to keep it really cheap. I'm going to make it so affordable that people can't help but buy it. Now understand that price is in many people's mind closely related to quality. And if you sell something really cheap, they're going to want to know why. What's wrong with it that you're selling a Mercedes-Benz for $8,000 when everybody else is selling it for $80,000? Yeah, it's really cheap, but there's got to be something wrong. So part of what I want to convince you on price is to charge what it's worth, to charge what your customers will pay for it, because it's not just the cheapest guy in town. And there's certainly a market for the cheapest guy in town. Just ask Bob's Furniture. He's the cheapest guy in furniture. And he has a good living at that. But not everybody's going to be the cheapest guy. So think about the price. Think about where it fits. So as far as the customer goes, we're going to be talking about a target market. Now, a target market are those people, businesses, individuals, whatever, that are most likely to buy your product. And it's important to focus on who's most likely to buy your product so that you can save money. You don't want to advertise to everybody in the United States if you're only going to be available in the Mid-Atlantic region. You're wasting your money going to NBC and ABC and buying Super Bowl commercials if nobody can buy it outside of Montgomery County. So part of what you want to think about is who is going to buy your product? Where do they live? How old are they? What kind of education do they have? What other aspects can you identify to make them your most likely candidates? And once you know who they are, hopefully you have some way to communicate with them, some way to identify and to target and to communicate with just that particular group. And they can afford your product. So that's kind of the essence of a target market. Who's going to buy it? Can you reach them? And can they afford it? Now, as far as looking at the target market, very often that starts with demographics. How old is your typical customer? What kind of income do they have? What level of education do they have? And there are lots of services out there that will provide this sort of demographic for retail customers. If you're looking at business to business, the questions are different, but same idea. Geography, where are they located? I've already mentioned that you probably want to stay in the Mid-Atlantic region, at least for now. You may have eventually plans to go throughout the United States and worldwide and dominate. But for now, let's start with just the Northeast region or the Mid-Atlantic region. Is your customer more likely to live in an urban setting or a rural setting, depending on the product that you've got? What are they likely to do with this product? End use could be, I need to do laundry. Well, if I need to do laundry for my brand new baby girl, I'm going to spend more money and I'm going to get better detergent than if I need to do laundry for the football team. Because if I'm doing laundry for the football team, I just want to get the yuck off of the clothes, and if I can get the yuck off of the clothes, I'm good. So for the football team, yeah, I'm going to care a lot about price and not so much about brand. But if it's for my baby daughter, oh, you bet I'm going to get the very perfect brand, and I don't care what it costs because it's worth it. And then finally, psychographic, lifestyles. Is your customer going to be older and retired? Are they going to be older with kids still at home? Are they going to be younger, married, not married, living with somebody? They have kids, they don't have kids. What is it about their lifestyle that makes them a likely target? So given all of these, the more you can focus in and determine who is going to be your customer, the easier it is to find other people just like that. So you want to narrow it down as much as you can. There are services that will, for a fee, connect you with people that meet any of these particular characteristics. So step one, figure out what your target market is. From there, the next part I want to discuss is where your product fits in the mind of your primary customers. So perception is how a buyer views your product compared to everything else that's out there. It's not truth. It's not based on statistical data. It's based on their opinion. And based on their opinion of your product versus other products, you can create what's called a perception map. And a perceptual map will quite often look at two elements, the price and the quality. And given the price and the quality, now this was a perception map by a particular student, where do you see your product fitting? Now, if you're Mercedes-Benz, yeah, it's really expensive. It's very high priced, but it's also very high quality. And in the mind of this particular student, he was like, yeah, that, it's worth it. It's the very best you can get, and you're going to pay for the very best, sort of like a Porsche. Not so good, unfortunately, are things like the Infiniti. I guess he had a bad experience with an Infiniti, or somebody he knew had a bad experience. So even though it tends to be a fairly high-priced product, in his mind, it's not a high-quality product. So part of what you want to think about is, where in this spectrum do you want to fit? And I'll tell you right now, if you keep your prices really low, it's going to be a hard sell to convince people that you have really high quality. So that's why you'll notice most of this goes up and to the right, generally from low quality, low price, all the way up to the high quality, high price items. So that's an issue that I want you to identify for your product. Where do you think your customer is going to perceive you compared to your competitors? Is it the high-end, high quality, or is it the value priced? This Desai company, I never heard of them before. Apparently they're available in England. and you can buy a brand new car for $8,000. Now, if I'm going to buy a brand new car for $8,000, I'm going to want to know what's missing. But you can apparently do that. And it's not a very good car, but you can get a brand new car for $8,000. The way you can help identify and help control where people perceive you on this map is through something called a 5-box positioning tool. It's the position in their mind of your product. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is it's 6 boxes. And it's called the 5-box tool. I didn't create it. I don't know who did. I've used it quite a while, and yes, it is 6 boxes, but it's worth it. Now, the way this works is the first thing, and I'm going to ask you to do this, this is what the activity I'm going to ask you to follow up on afterwards, is to think about the current belief. What is the mindset that people currently have? What do they think about your competitors, about your product, about the environment as it exists today? And based on their current belief, this leads to their current actions. Following that, I'm going to ask you to think about, well, what would you like them to believe? What would you like them to hold firmly in their mind about your product, about your competitors? And based on the desired belief, that's going to lead to some desired action. Most often that means I'm going to go out and buy something. Now, the way you get from what currently is to what you want to have people hold in their minds is through a value proposition. Now, the value proposition is the single most persuasive statement you can make to promote your product. And I'm going to ask you today to develop a value proposition. What is the single most persuasive statement you can make to promote your product? Sorry, I forgot the last part of it. Based on that value proposition, I'm going to ask you to identify why you believe that to be true. Now, I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, and this is a made-up example, but it is a coffee system. I used to call it a coffee pot, but nobody buys a coffee pot anymore. These days you buy a coffee system. And the coffee system that I want to discuss is the Alpha coffee system. Well, right now my current belief is that my Keurig makes a pretty good cup of coffee and it's a reasonable price and it fits on my desk. So I'm going to use Keurigs to brew coffee at work. Well, that's my current belief. But what I want to have you choose and to believe in the future is that the Alpha coffee system is the best option for you to use at work. And if you believe truly Alpha is the best option, then you're going to switch and start using Alpha. So how do I get from current to desired? Well, that's by convincing you that Alpha coffee system uses the most flavorful coffee in the world. It's sourced, priced, and packaged to be your daily cup of coffee. And why do I know that's true? Why do I know it's the most flavorful coffee? Well, because they've already won 3 international taste tests. I know that it's environmentally friendly. It's grown, packaged, and shipped in accordance with all sorts of environmental organizations. That it comes in models suitable for my desktop, and that it costs less than most ground coffee. So this is why I know this statement is true. I'm going to ask you to, for your individual products, go through this. What is the current belief? What is the desired belief? How do you get them there, and how do you know it's true? So we'll come back to this in a little bit. The last thing, though, that I wanted to talk about is forecasting sales, because that's going to be something that comes up, is what do you think your sales are going to be? Well, that is either to estimate the number of units or to estimate the dollar value of the sales. There are 6 different approaches, and these are Professor Fraser put this together, so I have to give her credit for this. The first of these is a competitive approach, and it's basically look at your competition. see what they're selling, see what kind of prices they're charging, see what you can find on the internet. It's amazing what you can find on the internet about what your competitors are doing. The second, the build-up approach, says to estimate how many people do you think are going to purchase your product in this area? What do you think is a reasonable price in this area? And then you just multiply number of sales times price, and that'll get it for you. The third of these is executive judgment. And this is where you ask someone who is involved in the market their professional opinion. Now, you want to be careful with executive judgment because it's easy to confuse executive judgment with a wild guess. And sometimes a wild guess is the best you've got. But ideally, you'd like to be able to talk to somebody who's already doing this, who's already in your area or in your business or has some connection to this target area, and ask them, what kind of sales do you get? What would you expect? The fourth of these strategies is to just kind of test the waters, launch the product in a small scale, see what kind of response you get, see who is willing to buy, how much are they willing to pay. Number 5 is to ask your customers, if you already have a product on the market, if you already have customers that you're willing to go out and talk to. One thing that is easy to do is walk up to a customer and say, would you buy my product? And inevitably the customer is going to say, oh, of course I would, because they want to be nice to you. So rather than say, would you buy my product, ask them, what kinds and quantities of similar products do you already purchase? So you're not going to offend me if you don't buy a lot of it. I just am trying to do some market research. So what do you already buy? What kinds of things are you already spending money on? Because if I can figure out what you're already spending money on, and I have a good value proposition, hopefully I can convince you to take that money that you're spending on somebody else's product and spend it on mine. And then finally, the last is kind of backwards, where you know you need a certain amount of revenue, and you know what your price is, so you take the required revenue, divide it by price, and say, oh dear Lord, I hope I sell this many. And at least you've got some estimate of what you need to sell in order to break even. Now, there are 6 different ways to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and, well, come on. There we go. Because there are 6 different ways, what I recommend is that you try several, do 2 or 3, and see if they're kind of the same, if they're at least in the same ballpark for how much quantity you're going to sell, or what kind of income that you expect. You can feel pretty comfortable. You know, none of them may be exactly right, but at least they're all kind of the same. If, on the other hand, you try 3 different ways to estimate sales and you get 3 totally different numbers, maybe you need to be careful about the numbers that you pick. Because it's easy to just pick a number out of thin air. But if you can do some research, if you give it some thought, if you try to figure out what is it that I realistically think I'm going to sell, document the process, try several others, and then hopefully that gives you a much better estimate. You need to understand and believe in your numbers. When you present at Raptor Tank, you want to make sure you're comfortable with your numbers so that when people start saying, well, where did you get that from? How did you make up, where did that number arrive from? You have some basis to say, well, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and this is why I think it's a reasonable estimate of units sold or a reasonable estimate of income, whatever the case might be. And then finally, if you can find somebody in a similar business outside of your target market, it's okay to ask them and say, can you give me some advice? Can you give me a heads up? What are you doing? What's working for you? So that is, in a very short statement, some of the things you want to consider for marketing. It is the marketing mix, which is the product, the placement, the price, and the promotion. It is the position in the customer's brain of what they think about your product. And finally, it's being able to put together a rough guess of what you think you're going to be able to sell. Now, as I said, I'm going to ask you to look at this 5-box positioning tool and to fill this out and think about where people are right now. What are they doing right now? And how do you want to change that? And to me, the most important part is that value proposition. What are you going to, oh, you might need one more. What is the strongest statement you can make to promote your product? And that's what I want you to think about. We're going to gather together in a few, 15 minutes or so and discuss these and share value propositions.